You are listening to Leverage, the podcast about power, politics, and influence. I'm Kristal Hyde Taylor.
And I'm Breon Wells.
And I am struggling, twin. I know we're supposed to be focused because the topic today, I feel is so on point. Never have I ever. Never have
That game.
I ever.
That's a wonderful
You remember
game.
that game? You remember that
Yeah.
game?
You know what? We should start off. Never have I ever drinking a lemon drop. How about you? You go next. What?
Never have I ever had my personal property explored by the FBI. Oh, no, that's too soon.
Let me go.
Well,
Never
you
have
go.
I ever taken classified documents, hid them, and never have I ever been in a negotiation with the FBI for a number of months on whether, actually a year and some change, on whether I will bring back said documents. Because had I, there would not be a show called Leverage with at least Breon Wells being a part of it. Never have I ever.
Never. Okay, I got one. Never have I ever had the FBI director that I hired, that I appointed, be the person to orchestrate and oversee an exploration of my personal premises and property.
Right. So listen, family, listen, subscribers, people of God, children of all the things wonderful. Listen. So on August 8th, it was a Monday. This is one of those I remember where I was when ... We got news that President Trump's house had been explored by the FBI.
Explored, yes.
Yes, who obtained a search warrant to be able to search the premises of Mar-a-lago, where he stays. You know, of course, that is his home, but it's not just his home. It's a whole public facility where folks can patron it, right? Room and board. And also apparently where foreign nationals and sometimes some spies or other, foreign entities tend to just traverse freely. It speaks already of a space that maybe should not be most suited for classified documents. However, apples, oranges, tomato, pear, those commonalities.
You mean you don't keep your classified documents in places where people who may want to review or purchase said classified documents, you don't keep that in a hotel?
Right. And actually,
that's not where you keep
would
that?
assure you that no one other than Donald Trump keeps classified documents. Like, I have clearances. I work in these spaces. I could never have I ever been able to take any classified documents, regardless of the classification, anywhere. Like, there's a whole protocol and system set up. So one would ask the question, because here's the backdrop. Donald Trump.
Question is, but what happened to her emails? Oh,
right. No,
okay.
that was the question, which led him to do a federal law that congressional Republicans and some Democrats, voted for, to make it level it from a misdemeanor to a whole felony. And isn't it funny that is the same exact thing that you get caught up? It reminds me of that statement, it be your own people.
It's your own
sometimes it be your own self, huh? So
it be your own self.
What had happened was, I think that we'll always be good at starting Donald Trump statements and stories with that. What had happened was that Donald J. Trump, when leaving the White House, took boxes of documents with him. Many of those, it sounds like, was questionable on whether they were classified or not. So then the National Archives, who collects some of these things, for all presidents and collects these documents, said something's not right. Something's missing. Some pages are missing. Some documents are missing. And so they began to try to talk to the former Trump administration about getting those documents. Those documents, took a year or a year and a half, time that we would not be afforded, twin.
Never have I ever had extra time and leniency
never
applied
And they asked nicely in numerous things. When that didn't seem to work, they then reached out to the FBI. The FBI then looks in it further and had reason to believe that there was some sensitive information, classified information that may be there. So, they did the legal thing, right? They went through and set up the metrics to get a warrant. They had to prove probable cause that there was likely crimes that had occurred, and they got a judge to go ahead and sign off on that. For those that don't know, warrants often get like a 2-week span.
Mm-hmm.
So they had these 2 weeks. Mind you, we've now come from a year and a half of talking very nicely. And part of their concern, it seems, is that as they were talking to the Trump administration, Twin, they felt that maybe the Trump administration and Trump himself might not have been truthful. Like, shocker. He
Forthcoming.
was a
Yeah,
liar.
let's say forthcoming. They were not fully forthcoming.
They weren't
Like,
forthcoming.
oh.
They had reason to believe he might be lying. So that was in part why they felt the pressing urgency to conduct this exploration. And what they did is they tried to coordinate with the Secret Service to make sure that it was not at a time when he was there, so that they could not make it public news, right? They wanted to be as delicate for Donald Trump and as sensitive, apparently, as possible. Side note, had that been you or I, they would have found us in our personal job at the point that they suspected it might be there and arrested us and put us in prison while they thought about whether it was valid or not.
Correct.
Let's just lay that table.
This is the privilege afforded to a former president.
That's right. Yeah. Well, not even because had it been Barack Obama, I think that would have been again, but this is afforded to only Donald J. Trump. So we found out about it because Donald J. Trump released this whole statement talking about he had been raided and, this was a violation of his rights and never has he ever experienced such a thing. And, all of
what accountability? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And so he said, he had this, he's always had this search warrant. He had the property receipt that he could release, and he decided not to. But the DOJ, in an unprecedented move for an unprecedented time, decided to. And boy, the treasure trove that at least they are mining through now. So this is
break it down for us. Yeah, like break it down for where we are now with the counts. Like, what is he currently facing? Because they have found the stuff.
Yeah,
let's call it the stuff. They found classified. They found the goods. They found some good goods. Okay, not just Megan. Good goods. I did say I'm sorry.
They have found the goods. What they have charged him with. Well, before we even found out, what was unsealed, there was this leveling of they had planted the evidence. That was the first thing Donald J. Trump had said, that apparently the FBI had planted classified documents amongst him. He said it was a setup. Then we went all the way on the other end of the spectrum of, but wait, actually, I declassified all of this as president of the United States because I can do that. Now, he's not wrong that he could have done that, but it's not this unilateral, one whispers it under their breath as they're walking to the bathroom. You see what I'm saying?
Correct.
And, or he's walking, to go grab a bite to eat. No. There's a whole system that is set in place that you have to get it outside of yourself, be documented. Those things is still sketchy on whether that happened. So we went from there to, it's been declassified and I declassified it, which ramped up his supporters before we even saw any evidence that, they're now ready to defund the police. And let me stop and just out of petty, not to provoke you, Twin. Let's do a never have.
It's a struggle. We trying to stay less petty right now. We struggle.
I can remember when the Republicans had masterfully pinned and still have masterfully pinned the Democrats into this defund the police. And
Mm-hmm.
you had the Democrats trying to say, no, 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 we're not for that. We're not for that. We believe in law enforcement. And now you have Republicans outwardly, like outright calling for defund,
The
like they're
FBI.
back to blue until they're not.
But we
And
already knew that was the case because it was many blue lives that apparently did not matter during the January 6th insurrection.
correct.
So it's like it's all about let's support law enforcement when it is convenient for us and laws are being enforced against other people. But when it comes to me, oh, I don't want accountability. No, 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 that can't be the right thing. There has to be
Yep.
something wrong with this. The system is broken because the system, if working correctly, is actually supposed to police and enforce laws against those other people, people of
Yep.
color, immigrants. You name the category, but it's supposed to be everybody but us.
Yep.
But when the tables are
So
turned, it's a very different dynamic.
in this spirit of petty, never have they ever, and by they I mean Black Lives Matter, never have they ever, in response to being brutalized, beat, killed, maimed, never have they ever called for FBI agents and police to be killed. Huh. Never have they ever
Interesting.
brutally attacked
Interesting.
law enforcement. No,
Mm.
never have they ever. But you know who has? Let's go ahead and fill that void. Proud Boys, White Supremacy Today. That I think that's a magazine that they have in
Mm-hmm.
publication, White Supremacy Today. In which they do tips
I
on
don't
how,
subscribe to that one. You think I could get
yeah,
me a? Can I get a subscription? I
you
could be like the
know,
Clayton Bigsby of um of white supremacy e-newsletter
well, they probably
subscriptions.
give
Okay.
tips there on if one will storm the Capitol, how to make sure that you shed that dad bod before you
Mm.
go to storm that Capitol. You know what I mean? Because you want to be as fit as possible. That might be in the publication of White Supremacy Today. Um,
I'm
but
struggling so hard to not be petty. I'm trying.
I'm
Oh
not
God,
making it
help
easy,
me.
twin. I know I'm
You
not.
are
I'm
not.
sorry.
I'm
I
trying. I'm
just
trying. I'm trying, and I am struggling. Cause I think there's so many fascinating dynamics about this situation. What is most interesting to me right now is I am certain that so much of the media spin that you see, for instance, on Fox News, by
mm-hmm.
the way, if you haven't seen it yet, Trevor Noah and The Daily Show did this hilarious little skit where basically they took all these clips about what the FBI should do and what should have happened, how things should have been, how what's appropriate behavior in the context of Hillary and her emails, and they flipped it to this current situation with
Yep.
Trump and the Red. When tears, literal tears came down
Yep.
my face. But I mean, I think what's really interesting about this moment, politically speaking, right, when we start
Mm-hmm.
dissecting what's the politics involved in this, is every argument we're going to hear is ultimately going to pivot towards and how does this impact Trump and his attempted presidential run in 2024?
Yep. So
And yeah,
no, so I think immediately to your point, the raid had happened and you
the
had
exploration, the
oh, the exploration. You're
exploration,
right. I am not about to further that. The exploration had
the
happened.
exploration.
And you had the Democrats and left-leaning people, of course, like, gotcha, we're about to find him in prison with orange jumpsuits on. And then you had the
Would
right
you be
that
able to
was
see the jumpsuit, or would it
right.
just blend in?
You had the right that was like, well, wait a minute, we want transparency because we can't trust the FBI and we can't trust law enforcement. And so both sides called on Attorney General Merrick Garland to break precedent within the DOJ and further make public a little bit of the thinking, which on August 11th, 3 days after, he decided, let me make a motion to the courts to
Mm-hmm.
have them unseal the warrant and to unseal the property receipt. To which Donald Trump said, I absolutely believe that should happen. Newsflash, he could have always released it and had that transparency. But okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they did. And what did we find, twin? We found that he was being accused. Allegedly, he has broken potentially three laws, excuse me. And that's the Espionage Act of 1917, which deals with, before we, go there, just thinking James Bond, it's not just like dealing with spies, but it's also dealing with the documents and how you may leave them accessible to our foreign adversaries and how they may get a hold of that and the damage that could happen.
Which, by the way, quickly before you move on, what did we just say earlier about accessibility when your place of residence is also a resort?
And remember when that Chinese lady had somehow found her way into Mar-a-Lago, and it was
How did that happen? Oh.
So these documents were sitting right there, probably on the coffee table with a little, with some milk and cookies,
sitting right on top of the Wall Street Journal.
Style. Exactly. That was like
delivered to your door.
Come visit here.
So, enjoy breakfast and this interesting morning read.
Yep. So they get him on the Espionage Act. They get him on an a charge of obstructing the law, Section 1519 of the same U.S. Code, Title 18. And then Section 2071, which criminalizes the theft or destruction of government documents.
Which, by the way, to your earlier point, what are you supposed to do with classified documents? Are they supposed to go with you, twin?
They're not, and they're not. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's a solid no.
Like, no.
For regular citizens that are not Donald Trump, we would have had concurring life sentences of like 435 years. They would have made a separate special Guantanamo Bay experience for the rest of us. But, Donald Trump. So he asked, this is one of those, be careful what you ask for. They said, the Republicans said they wanted transparency. Now they have given.
Voila.
Merrick Garland said, have all the seats so that you may read in this library all of the different levels of crimes that we are alleging that he broke. To which and here's where we engage in the politics of it then. The response has since been, Donald Trump's response has been, I declassified these things. And the Espionage Act was specifically, I believe, cited by Merrick Garland to speak to such a move. Because the Espionage Act of 1917 was in place well before what would be the modern classification system that is open to and at the behest in some ways of the president, right? In the executive branch, started by Harry S. Truman, who put that together again in 1945-ish, so the 1940s versus 1917, the Espionage Act. None of the three charges that he is charged with require a classification. What they are alleging is whether they were classified or not, should that information get out, that sensitivity of that could cause a harm and a threat to national security. So whether it's classified or not, even if you declassified it, what he still has not answered is how they got from the White House to Mar-a-Lago. You should have never had them. Whether they were declassified or not, you should still have never had these documents because they're the property of the American people.
As Michael Cohen, his former personal attorney, has already speculated, he think that they're about to throw Rudy Giuliani under the bus, under the bus of buses, all the buses. Every single problem is about to be
build new buses.
How did these documents get to your house? Rudy must have brought them.
That's where we're headed.
Are you aware of what the laws were, even the ones that you changed?
Yep.
Were you Rudy didn't tell me. Did you know that these things were probably Rudy? It's about to be Rudy, and we don't mean Huxtable.
But here's the politics angle that should be worrisome, especially to Black America and Brown America, which we've been calling this from the beginning. But this goes to further show the mentality of a potential tyrant or a dictator. Everything about his argument is screaming, I can unilaterally do this without
do what I want to do.
Checks and balances.
What I want to do.
Yep. And while, yes, the president can classify or declassify documents, there's a process that goes outside of him and or her in the future, right? That has to, you got to bring in other minds, and it needs to be documented, and the process has to be upheld. And often tyrants, dictators, they hate that pesky process as much as those criminals in Scooby-Doo hated those meddling kids. I'd have gotten away with it had it not been for you meddling kids. You know what I mean? That
I
whole thing.
mad you through Scooby-Doo. Scooby ain't do nothing to nobody, and you had to throw him into this. I am distraught and disappointed all at the same time. But you know what's so crazy though about this whole construction illegality, say that 10 times fast,
Right.
illegality of Trump's conduct or not, right? To be seen, right? Everybody is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, right? Illegality aside, does it actually matter? Like in this, when you step back and you think about this moment that we are in, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I have been so tempted. Okay, don't let me lie, not that tempted, but at least curious enough to be like, I wonder if I should download Truth Social to just see the vast difference. And for those people who may not be familiar, Truth Social is Donald Trump's social media platform. So
Yep.
like you get booted off of Twitter, come to Truth Social.
Build your
That's where the
own.
conversation happens. Build your own. Like what's their tagline is Truth Social is America's big tent social media
It
platform.
was the newest platform for those 4chan
Right,
and 8chan people. And in case you
right,
don't know what
right.
4chan and 8chan, think of the darkest, dirtiest, most violent things of the dark web. But it's all wrapped in
All
white
organized.
supremacy and all right wrapped in
Organized in one place for easy
right.
consumption.
So,
But like I mean that I think that's actually what is most relevant about his conduct, right? And I think you are spot on about this whole episode really bearing out the tendencies of a tyrant and a dictator. But I mean, you got to wonder, it's like, so bigger picture, to what extent does any of this stuff actually matter for people? First of all, for the people who put him in office the first go round, but as we position things, we know that we're headed into midterm season, and while he is not on the ballot, certainly candidates that he has endorsed, people who he supports, policies that he espouses are all kind of under a microscope right now, right? Because these are things that are going to be up for debate and discussion and
yep.
ultimately on the ballot starting in October for early voting and obviously November 8th for election day. So, I mean, I think that is one of the big political questions, right? And big practical questions of all of this. What's the actual effect going to be on everyday people, right? Because how much does the allegation that he's broken these three discrete laws, right? How does that bear on the people who are going to support him, right? Because chances are, if you already weren't a Trump supporter, this is just more fire on the like, see, knew that man was crooked. That's why you shouldn't have voted for him in the first place. But
Yep.
if you are one of those ride or dies,
There.
does this dissuade you from Trump, or does it actually cause you to double down on your support and be like, you know what? This is right. The system is broken. This is why we need him back. This is why we need the governors and the members of Congress and the Senate folks. We need everybody who Trump has supported. We need them in office to recorrect the ship because clearly this is corruption. Clearly there's a problem afoot. Like, I mean, I think that's actually the bigger question and conversation point around this. Because when you think about who is involved in analyzing and dissecting what he did, why he did it, why it matters, how it impacts, the institution of American government versus who's just, caping for Trump because that's who appeals to them. That's who meets them emotionally and mentally wherever they are. I mean, it's a kind of scary proposition. It
It,
is a kind of scary proposition.
it is. And I think the answer to your question is so complex that it requires
Mm-hmm.
people to have a multi-layered and nuanced approach to this political question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't happen in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump did not steal the 2016 election.
Correct.
He was voted in by, the Constitution looks at the Electoral College process, not the popular
Mm-hmm.
vote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he did check the boxes, and there was enough people, according to the Electoral College measurement, that believed, and that bought into giving him a chance. In the 2020 election, I want to remind people that 75 million folks voted for this man.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have, and most likely would have been more, had it not been for his semi-poor handling, to some people, of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't his racism, wasn't his xenophobia, wasn't his sexism. It wasn't all the blatant things that should have been the red herrings. And the reason I bring that up, partially to be petty, but also to be detail-oriented, is he got there by the help of many of these Republicans that currently sit in spaces, and they were behind him even as they didn't like him for political survival. Now they're sticking with him for their own actual life survival, as we see the number and ways since this FBI exploration occurred, the number of vigilantes, domestic terrorists who have been now attacking FBI spaces, going off and doing what white supremacy will do when it feels that it is slighted, and going off and trying to cause harm and destruction and lay it all down on the line, even their very death. They've shown they're willing to do that. And so you have a Republican Party that has hugged too closely this person with tyrant tendencies and now can't double back because they're scared for their livelihood. You also have Democrats who, regardless of what they think, this whole bipartisanship requires you to overlook the Republicans' willingness at one point to embrace just to win a Donald Trump. I don't see how you can find middle ground there, but however, these Democrats, God bless them, are still yet trying to find some sort of middle ground with some Republicans, while they're also playing this other hand of trying to ratchet up more and more in this political season their weight behind these Republicans that would be election deniers. So this gamble means that in this political time, the question you raised, Twin, is an excellent question, but it requires us to account for the Republicans' hand in this, the Democrats' hand in trying to further bipartisanship, and that hand in still adding some weight and some fuel to this, and this fact that we have this known tyrant that, because of definitely mostly Republicans and Trump, have brought into Trumpism, which has them saying, if he says my house was raided and this was a violation of my property and my rights, we don't even need to see the evidence. We're going to take him at his word, and we're ready to go out here and mobilize and destroy life as we know it.
I mean, you're spot on. And I think what is ultimately tragic in this moment is, one, we have been living out over the last 5 years in particular, probably one of the best case studies in how frail democracy is, right? And how fractured the American Republic actually is, right? So, I mean, there's that end of it. But then you also realize that politics, who knows, maybe this has always been politics, but politics certainly in this moment is about cult of personality and not policy. And if you're not about policy, you can't really be about people in a broad scale and systemic way, right? Because you're so focused on, this is the personality that intrigues me. This is who titillates me. This is, ooh, this is so fascinating. I'm drawn in. I understand. He understands my struggle. But then the policies that emanate from an administration like this, as we've already seen, aren't helping the people who could most benefit from a sound policy foundation,
That's
right? And
right.
it's like it is peak bizarro in a certain way, right? Because I think that if you go back, God knows it's been forever since I've read 1984, but if you go
Oh
back,
yeah.
I feel like this is the pretext for dystopia,
Yep.
and we are
Yep.
we tiptoeing. I don't even know that we tiptoeing. We are right there on the edge. Like our toe is in the water, your ankle might be in. We kind of leaning a little bit,
Yep.
And I mean, I really just wonder, I try not to let my most cynical impulses take over, but it's this moment where you realize unless people get really serious about understanding policy and how the
Mm-hmm.
people who are elected and appointed to various positions drive that policy, and how that policy, whether it's local, state, or federal, impacts your daily life and
That's
existence.
right.
Like, unless we reorient towards that understanding and then embrace as part of our identities this idea that civic engagement can't just be the one off every other day. It feels like a sports thing. Oh, there's an election coming up. Let me tune in and then I'm out.
Yep.
Like, if we don't make that fundamental shift, the things that people profess to love so much about America are going to be dead and gone within the next generation, if not sooner.
So you ain't wrong, twin. You asked earlier, where are we? Politically, where we are is we're at the midterms
Mm-hmm.
where Trump is not on the ballot,
Mm-hmm.
but Trumpism is.
Mm-hmm.
Biden is not on the ballot, but Bidenism is. You're talking about at least two different ideologies with which both of the major parties have aligned up under one of the two of those. Let's run this process out real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we've now uncovered through this exploration all of this stuff. There is upcoming a hearing later this week to try to get the affidavit unsealed. The DOJ is against that, right? Because they say that there's too much information in there that it could have a chilling effect on their ongoing investigation and potential witnesses being able to be open to working in the fullest manner and cooperating with them. Because in order for them to have gotten this warrant in the first place, somebody in Trump world, there apparently it was more than one person, informant that was like, it was Mrs. White in the library with the candlestick. You know what I mean? Like, they were telling
Why did I
specific.
know you was gonna say the candlestick? It's always the candlestick. It is always the candlestick,
The
y'all.
warrant gives you specific spaces that you can go into, and then other spaces that you cannot. So what the warrant outlined is they couldn't go into patrons' rooms, right? The
Mm-hmm.
people that have been just guests of there. You can't go in their room and search these things, but you can go in his office, Donald Trump's office, the bedroom, and some of these other spaces. So where we are is, if he does not get indicted at the end of all of this, and not just indicted, this is a high proof, indicted, and if he's not slapped with meaningful prison time,
Mm-hmm.
because let's run through this real quick. So the Espionage Act, it carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. Section 1519, the obstruction, is the penalties of up to 20 years per offense for the act of destroying or concealing documents and records. And then this criminalizing of the theft or destruction of government documents holds with it its own sort of penalties to be determined, but we're already talking about potentially a maximum of 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
He would have to get not just indicted, but he would need to get at least 4 years in prison in order for him not to be able to actually run and be president in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he's just simply indicted and they go easy on him, there's nothing
They
stopping.
wrote
This
the
is how
man's
backwards,
campaign.
right? But
It's
this
like,
is how
yeah.
backwards it is. You can run for office with a record. You can't vote.
That don't make sense to you? No?
I mean, call me old fashioned in the rhetoric of what justice would call for an equity, but yeah. And
I
so
mean,
he could be indicted and still run and still win. So if the DOJ does not indict him and he is not successfully indicted and given a substantial prison sentence that would literally physically bar him from being able to engage in an election and be president, y'all may have a problem on your hands, America. Y'all may have the repeat. And so
don't
this
be
is
saying y'all,
why.
you gonna be here too.
Look, I don't know where. Listen, heaven is my home. Jesus is my savior. He's my king. That's the only thing I recognize at this point. But I think that what this means for everyday people listening in is, while Trump may not be on the ballot today, again, we can't deny that he did not get in here by himself. And he had help. Remember when folks decided that they didn't want to indict him in the impeachment trials? Remember those senators and congressmen that helped aid and abet in that insurrection? This would be the time that while Trump is not in the ballot, we've already told you, he is he is giving tyrant.
It's giving.
He's giving.
It's giving. It's giving.
It's giving tyrant. It's giving
giving.
dictator. And it's giving that you have those people that will aid and abet in it. So as you approach the ballot box, as we say, we always encourage you to approach the ballot box. Don't take it for granted. Don't stump for either party. Strategy. But that strategy may say, I need to look at in this election cycle, those candidates and people that give tyrant enabling, that they enable these sorts of things.
We should put
those
that on the
shouldn't
mug.
be the ones that show up on your bingo card. You don't want to pick them. You don't want to
be like, it's a nah.
It's a nah for me.
Nah.
I'm fasting. C-Twin, you'll appreciate this. Christian, I'm fasting from tyrant tendencies. You know what I mean? I'm fasting voting for those in tyrant tendencies.
I mean, I know it's past Lent, but can we give up tyrants for Lent and get around? Like, you know what? In advance, it's in advance of Lent 2023. We giving up tyrants. We giving up tyrants.
That's where we're positioned, where politically, you all need to think about not just at the presidency, but since his ideology is on the ballot, what sorts of candidates are screaming yes for that? And if that's cool with you, I personally found that weird. You should get that checked out. But if that's cool with you,
unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe. If it's not, unsubscribe. Don't push the like button. Don't follow. Don't check yes in the electoral space, not in the ballot box, for those candidates that enable it. Because what we stand to have is, if you let him back in, so on the policy side, we know that Congress is looking at the Electoral Count Act, that would, try to clarify what has already been law, that the vice president is just a ceremonial figurehead in this certification process, and that they can't do these, things. The danger, though, is that while the vice president is, and we saw Mike Pence did the proper thing. I'm not about to hail him as a hero. He did the proper thing in January 6th.
He did the totally mundane and expected thing that every other vice president
lowered
before him has
the threshold and he stepped over it. And
he did his job.
He did his job.
You actually did your job.
But what we can't account for is, depending on this election and the turnout, knowing that we have a lot of election deniers who are out there, if they get into Congress, now let's take, and you can now multiply the number of people who were enablers in January 6th and you will see that force multiplied in the midst of an election that has Donald Trump's name on it. So folks want to really think about, on the policy side, who are the members of Congress and the state legislatures, these folks in these state legislatures that at the end of the day put together these elections. What does their worldview look like? Because if they're election deniers, chances are you're not in their, not that you're not in their vision, you're not favorably in their vision. I mean, one could say, I'm not going to go there. I almost went back to 15. Let me bring myself back.
Bring it back.
Bring it back. I see the light and I'm coming back.
Bring it back.
But I think that the question on the table is not just one of policy. It's not just one of politics as we get on the influence side. It's one of character. We don't simply need just more brilliant politicians in office, because Nixon was brilliant. But that brilliant mind can also imagine a world that is quite oppressive for you. So what's on the ballot is really your values. And how do these politicians, these folks that are running to represent you, how do they reflect your values, not just your policies? Are they honest people? Remember that saying, twin, there's no honor amongst thieves? That blesses me every time, because it's this fallacy that you buy into, that if you make this temporary agreement, that they will eventually have your best interest in mind. If they were willing to screw somebody else, trust me, you're on their list. They just haven't let you know yet.
Correct. It's why, although this is not a relationship show, it's why women and men should not consider themselves wanting to be locked down by the person who left somebody else to be with them, because you're not that special. If they left them, why you think they're not gonna leave you? Same thing, but different show. I'm sorry, different show.
No.
This is power, politics, and influence.
We can talk
let's
about,
bring it back.
We can talk about Neo and his wife and how folks are clapping back on, well, how did you get him? Because how you got him may say this might be what's happening to you.
What who was it? What Pharrell and them say? Get it how you live it. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. Now, I mean, as we close out this episode, I think, and you I think provided some real guideposts for this, but I think as we close out, we have to ask of ourselves and of our listeners, how are you going to use your personal influence to better investigate, evaluate, and interrogate the people who have the amount of influence to impact your daily life? And are those the people?
They're going out for their job. You're a responsible interview.
Dude, you had one job. Yeah, one job. But that's really what I think all of this boils down to. How do you use who you are, the personal platform that you have, to either empower or disempower somebody from having a job that literally affects hundreds of thousands, millions of people? Yep. And that's at every single level. That is at every single level. Like, we spend a lot of time talking about, Trump and what happens federally and what's going on with the Biden administration, all of that. But the reality is, it always comes down to, for each level of elected office, these people truly do dictate the terms of your life in so many ways.
Yep.
And so how are you going to participate differently in that process so that you're not surprised by the outcome, one, but so that you actually demonstrate the vested stake that you have? Don't just throw your vote away. And voting absent accountability, we're not going to say it's fully throwing the vote away, but you are taking away from yourself an opportunity to make sure that whoever you put in office at whatever position is doing the work that you gave them the job to do.
Yeah. The reason, and I think that sometimes this is not articulated enough, Twin, and is lost on the disciples of Get Out the Vote, right? Which I'm not trying to bash Get Out the Vote, but I will note here as a point of privilege that if you give people something to vote for and you follow through on those promises, you won't have to do as much Get Out the Vote effort because your receipts will speak for themselves. Now, I'll leave that for another show.
And that's on what?
Right. I'll leave that for the show.
Mary.
But what
on Mary
is
and that little lamb child.
Right. On what's often missed in the Get Out the Vote efforts is the fact that the reason we push you to engage civically is if you vote, you are more likely to do that follow-up in between elections to track how these elected officials are valuing your life, your say, and your stake in things. Those that take that road of apathy, which I must say is understandable, but it also, easier. Like anything else, has its consequences, good or and bad. Part of that means if you've put out the system altogether, that doesn't mean that you're not affected by it, but what that does mean is you're less likely to do that follow-up between elections that you never engaged in. And so we're not asking you, and we've never asked you to drink any Kool-Aid of any party. We have not asked you and never said, waste your credibility on any personality. But what we are saying is you should take a very serious thought at the compelling argument that we're making to have your say and to follow that say up with accountability. Because then you have better leverages to, in your vigilance, ensure that we don't get to another January 6th, which I would say is not off the table from happening again. And that's unfortunately on Mary Had a Little Lamb roasting away on an open fire.
What? How you can so right and so wrong all at the same time on Mary Had a Little Lamb. Well, Twin, we haven't solved the problems of the world, but we talked about whatever we was gonna say this episode.
And we got some therapy. I got therapy, so hopefully subscribers, you get yours, because I got mine, and apparently Twin got hers. Although I tried to get pettier, but
today was an exercise in restraint because I told you I was not gonna keep it pet. I wasn't gonna be petty.
I tried. I was not as successful.
Restraint and focus. That's that's the space I'm in today. Restraint and focus. We trying to we'll side out. I'm gonna go giggle in the corner though. Until next time, bye, Twin.
Bye, Twin.
You are listening to Leverage, the podcast about power, politics, and influence. I'm Kristal Hyde Taylor.
And I'm Breon Wells.